What if the moment Bell feared finally came true?
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Bell witnessed Wiene Xenos' death and became serious movie. Before we start, please go support tenma-sama for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Bell is a male. Bellcranel, an adventurer who went against all odds to help knowledgeable monsters called Xenos. And among those Xenos was a little vouivre named Wiene whom Bell seemed to love as if she were his little sister. Unfortunately, things didn't end so well here because Fels' resurrection spell was never cast. And Wiene died. Hey? Are you interested in a story where Bell is more serious and protective of those he loves? Where he has a real reason to be strong? Well, enjoy the video. The tragedy prologue. In the middle of a destroyed coliseum. The blood dripped on the floor. And trembling hands lifted the inert body of a vouivre who was slowly disappearing. The vouivre opened her eyes and looked with her last strength at the person who had her in his arms. She gave a small smile as if she was happy to see him there, even if she was about to die. His body had already dissolved up to the waist, and now only his abdomen and above remained. Her wings began to disappear, and before dying, with her last breath, she said her last words to the person who had defended her with all his will. Wiene. Be Bell, I love you, smiling weakly. And with those words spoken, the little vouivre closed her eyes and her body dissolved into nothing but dust. A small, shiny purple stone fell into the trembling hands of the person holding it, the last memory he would have of her, of the little monster he had grown fond of and considered part of his family, his little Wiene. 2 more drops fell to the ground, but this time they weren't blood, they were tears that belonged to the white-haired, red-eyed adventurer who now tremblingly held the magic stone of the vouivre that had just died in his arms. Bell, with both hands trembling, took the magic stone and looked at it in shock. More and more tears began to fall from Bell's face, who with trembling eyes, looked at the magic Wiene stone in his hands. Bell were. Ask. The magic stone of Wiene fragmented under the gaze of Bell, who was still in a trance. In the distance, a hooded man was being detained by several adventurers who were fighting against him. Fels watched in alarm as Wiene's body disappeared. He had to get there quickly. While the magic stone was still attached, maybe, and only maybe, he could use his resurrection magic on Wiene and revive her. However, a large group of adventurers stopped him and fought against him to stop him. Adventurer? You guys. Take care of little Rocky, seriously. 2 adventurers nodded and quickly ran towards Bell to attack him. Bell kept looking at the magic Wiene stone while crying. He didn't notice at all the 2 adventurers who were approaching him. Fels became more alarmed. He quickly extended his hand, and a ray of light came out of his palm, reaching some adventurers who were holding him back. The adventurers screamed in pain and fell to the ground holding their chests. The lightning would not kill them, but it would cause them great pain. Even so, there were still several more adventurers who continued to hold Fels back, who watched helplessly as those 2 adventurers approached Bell. Finally, both adventurers stood in front of Bell with annoyed looks. For them, he was nothing more than a traitor who had grown fond of the monsters that killed them day after day. One of the adventurers clicked his tongue as he watched Bell stare at the monster's fragmented magic stone in a trance and mercilessly struck Bell's hand. Bell opened his eyes in shock as he felt a hand hit his own, and fragments of magic stone flew out and scattered across the ground. Adventurer 1. React, you bastard, you're going to pay for all the damage you've done. Ham. The adventurer fell to the ground face down when a fist hit him in the face with great force. He couldn't even react. The second adventurer looked slightly surprised, but quickly gritted his teeth and threw a punch to the face, but his attack was easily stopped, and instead he felt a tug on the collar of his shirt. He was quickly knocked to the ground, roughly feeling a great pain in his back. The adventurer ignored the pain in his back and tried to get up, but a strong blow sent him back to the ground. Pam. 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 Quickly, Bell began to hit him roughly, blow after blow. The adventurer's face began to fill with bruises. Bell was attacking him furiously, while tears from his eyes fell into the. As he hit the adventurer, he couldn't help but remember the vouivre who just a few days ago was standing next to him laughing with joy while learning new things. Bell gritted his teeth and continued hitting him mercilessly. He was not in his right mind. No, he was furious. He could not think clearly about his actions. He was only thinking about the little vouivre they murdered, that they snatched from him. Bastard. Bell stopped hitting the adventurer and turned his gaze, staring with empty eyes at his companion who was standing near him with a sword in hand, ready to cut him in 2. Slash. In a quick movement, Bell drew his knife and blocked the attack to quickly rush at the adventurer too. The second adventurer tried to hit Bell, however his sword was quickly sent flying, and instead he screamed in pain as he felt a blade pierce his hand. Bell angrily buried his black knife in the adventurer's hand and held it back, while giving him a blank look. The Bell. Were? Why yo were? Ujimos. Bell. Welcome Bell. Bell I'm scared. Bell I love you. Memories of the vouivre filled his head, emotional moments he had experienced with her, moments he could never relive with Wiene because of them. He looked at the adventurer, he had been the one who hit his hand with the fragmented magic stone. He clenched his fist and his eyes filled with fury. It was all their fault. They had taken her away from him. They'd murdered her mercilessly, and why? Just for her claws and her wings. Just because she was a monster. She hadn't hurt anyone, she hadn't killed anyone, she was just an innocent little girl. And they murdered her. Bell. You're going to pay for taking her from me. She quickly began to hit the adventurer, her blows filled with fury and anger, at not having been able to protect her, at not having kept his promise that one day, she would be able to see the outside world without fear of being attacked. Pam. 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 There was no mercy in his blows, only fury. It didn't matter that his fists were covered in blood, it didn't matter that blood was already starting to splash on his face, it didn't matter that the adventurer was no longer moving, he just kept hitting. Blinded by anger and helplessness at not having been able to save Wiene. Bell. Ignoring the shout of his name, Bell continued hitting the man as tears fell, his eyes trembled, remembering with each blow he gave, Wiene, her hugs, her voice, her smile. Finally, his hand was stopped. Bell raised his head and looked at Fels who was standing in front of him holding his hand tightly. Fels. Détente Bell please. Fels' voice sounded sad, and how could it not be after Wiene's death and seeing someone as kind as Bell mercilessly beating another adventurer while letting himself be overtaken by rage. Bell looked at Fels' sad face and lowered his fist in silence as he came out of his trance. Bell. What? Bell brought a hand to his face in confusion before looking at his hand and being horrified to see it covered in blood. He raised both hands and watched them dripping with blood that was not his. Bell looked trembling at the adventurer below him who showed no signs of life, his face was disfigured, not many could withstand the flurry of furious punches from a level 3. Bell stood up from the adventurer's body and shook his head. Bell. I did it. Shaking, I killed him. Holding his head, I murdered him. Exalted. Bell began to breathe raggedly as he trembled as drops of blood fell from his hands. His clothes were also stained with blood that had splashed on him after he had been beating the man angrily for a long time. Bell stood up and took a few steps back as he looked horrified at himself and the blood that was beginning to spread from the corpse of the adventurer he had just murdered. Fels. He's not dead Bell. Bell. Looking at him. Fels. The blows left him badly injured, but he's still alive, calm down, you're not a murderer, looking at him. Bell and isn't he dead? Looking at the adventurer. Fels shook his head slowly and took Bell by the shoulder. Fels began to guide him elsewhere before saying. Fels. Stay here, I'll go heal the adventurer. Bell nodded silently and did nothing else, he stood there like a statue with a lost look. Fels, seeing that he wasn't looking at him, went up to the adventurer and looked at him in silence. From his tunic he took out some monster claws, and with them he tore the adventurer's face to make it look like Wiene had attacked him. The adventurer was dead. But he couldn't tell Bell that, so he told him a white lie that he was still alive and used monster claws so that when people saw the corpse, they would believe that it was Wiene who killed him. Bell silently put away his claws and then looked at a small piece of magic stone in front of his feet. Fels looked at him with helplessness and pity, not only had he not been able to revive her, no, he couldn't even try, but he had also used monster claws to make people believe that she had killed the adventurer, even though that was not the case. Fels took the piece of magic stone and apologized for tarnishing his image. I returned to Bell who was still there motionless looking at nothing and handed him that piece. Fels 10. Bell looked at him without any emotion and took the trembling stone, looking at it helplessly, the tears that had already stopped began to flow again when he saw that small fragment of the magic Wiene stone. Bell. I couldn't protect her, broken voice, as she was in front of me, and I couldn't save her, clenching his fist, I couldn't do anything. Fels. That's not true Bell, you. Bell. I did nothing. Nothing, falling to his knees. Bell looked down at the ground as he cried silently, remembering Wiene, all those weapons, all her screams, all her wounds and her last breath. Bell clenched his fist and lamented silently, he had failed, like his hero, like his friend, like his family. Fels watched him silently and looked away helplessly. I look at the sky in silence and wonder if I was really doing things right. When he saw the Xenos, rejected by their own kind and by the adventurers, he felt sorry and decided that they had already suffered enough and deserved to be able to live in peace, but even so, what had he done? He gave the Xenos weapons and food, and he kept in contact with them, but other than that, what had he done? He had known them for years, and what had he done for them besides giving them weapons and food? Nothing. And Bell. Bell didn't hesitate for a second to help them. He looked at them and didn't care that they were monsters. He didn't even know that other monsters were attacking them too. He extended his hand to them without hesitation. Thinking that monsters and humans should live together in peace, he offered them his help and friendship and did everything possible to help them. When they captured them in Knossos, what did he do? He rescued them and helped them even after they attacked the 18th floor. He trusted them. When Wiene came to the surface, what did he do? He stood in front of the Loki family to stop them from killing her, facing one of the strongest families in Arario. When Wiene was chased throughout the city, what did she do? She confronted and stopped all the adventurers who wanted to kill her, putting her reputation at risk. Bell didn't care about putting his public image at risk. He didn't care about people's comments or losing his fame. He helped them. He extended a hand to them, trusting them and thinking that one day they could live on the surface as friends. He really wanted to help them. Fels. I'm sorry, Bell. Bell didn't turn to look at him, maybe he didn't even hear him, yet Fels could see it in his eyes, that great internal conflict he was having within himself. Bell felt weak, useless, a failure. If he had been stronger, if he had tried harder, if he hadn't been so weak, this wouldn't have happened. Yes, this was her fault and the fault of those who murdered her just because of her appearance. Bell? Damn. Bell fell to the ground on his knees, and with his voice broken, he could do nothing but lament. Bell, damn. Hitting the ground, damn it. Ah. In that destroyed Colosseum, the only thing that could be heard was the scream that had seen one of them die, someone who had lost a loved one of the people they loved most right in their arms. Fallen Chapter 1. Mansion Chimney. Everything was different. In that gigantic mansion where the Hestia family lived, there was complete silence, as if the place was abandoned. The sound of bird singing was not heard, nor were the usual shouts and greetings from the few members of the family. Todo estaba en silencio. In the large room where almost all the members of the family gathered. Everyone was depressed. Hestia and Welf had their gaze lowered. Lily was sitting on a sofa with her gaze at the ceiling. She was the best at hiding her sadness. Mikoto was sitting a little further away from the others in silence while hugging Hera. Hera's ears and tail drooped. Her head was on Mikoto's chest as she cried. Everyone could hear her crying, which only made the mood drop even more. Hestia sighed heavily and turned to look at the window. Lily and Welf did the same and looked with concern at a white-haired man in the courtyard sitting silently. Outside the mansion, Bell was sitting on the grass staring into space in silence. His gaze was lost and his face reflected no emotion. He was there listening and watching through the large fence around the courtyard of the mansion as several adventurers and citizens looked at him with contempt and spit out words of disgust and poison towards him and his family. Bell didn't say anything to them. Despite listening to them, he was lost in his thoughts, remembering that scene over and over again. Wiene, Bell, I love you. Bell reacted slightly. He looked up and was horrified to see Wiene disappear right in front of him. His eyes moistened and he closed them tightly, not wanting to cry again. He had been remembering that scene over and over again in his head. He reached out a hand helplessly, but Wiene just fainted. Bell looked at both his hands. Suddenly the scene changed. His hands were stained with blood. Bell watched this trembling. He separated both hands and was horrified to see the blood-covered body of another adventurer right below him. The adventurer whom not more than a few hours ago he had been frantically beating with fury. Bell covered his eyes with both hands as he trembled. In his mind these scenes were repeating themselves over and over again, each time with more frequency and intensity, and each time more painful. Bell. Sorry, sniff, sorry, Wiene. Bell got into the fetal position, hiding his head in his knees. He was no longer that strong adventurer with a great determination to help the Xenos. Now he was just a 14-year-old boy who saw for the first time how someone he loved was murdered in front of him without being able to do anything. Talk. Hello. I'm welcome. The door of the mansion opened and everyone looked at Hermes with a calm smile. Hermes. Oh, I see that I didn't arrive at a good time, seeing everyone depressed. Hermes expected some complaint or at least some annoyed look, but he received nothing. Everyone simply went back to immersing themselves in their thoughts without caring in the least how Hermes came in. Hermes walked to the window and saw something that could be called pitiful. There he was, that adventurer whom only a few months ago he had defeated an irregular Goliath with one blow. Now he was in the fetal position, hiding his face from everyone. He didn't move in the slightest. He almost looked like a corpse. Hermes. Well, I came here to talk to him, so I'll go talk to him, walking. Hermes was about to leave the room when he was suddenly pulled and pushed back, exalting him. He looked behind him and watched in silence as everyone had stopped him. Lily and Welf were grabbing his arms, Hestia had him by the neck, Mikoto had him by the waist, and to his surprise, that Renard who just a few seconds ago was crying, was now in front of him, pushing him and preventing him from leaving. Hermes. I see you want me to have space, but this is important. Urano sent me to talk about the Xenos, seriously. Hera slightly loosened her thrust, but Hestia and Lily increased it. Lily Bell-sama already has too many problems to worry about more, would be. Hestia. Bell-kun has had enough for now, he doesn't need to get into any more trouble, tightening her grip. Hermes. Please let me talk to him, it's really urgent, smiling nervously. Welf and Makoto also increased the strength of their grip and prevented Hermes from moving. Hermes. Ah well, I tried it the good way, Asfi. Suddenly a light blue-haired girl with glasses also entered the room and with a quick movement hit Welf and Lily on the back of their heads, knocking them out. Hestia opened her eyes in surprise watching Asfi's hand about to pull her, but Makoto attacked her with a punch. Asfi easily deflected the attack and grabbed Makoto's arm, pulling her to the ground, knocking her face downwards. I was about to go after Hestia if it weren't for a voice that stopped everything. That's enough. Asfi opened her eyes when she saw that her arm was stopped, she looked at her left hand and Bell was there, holding her hand tightly preventing her from touching Hestia. Asfi pulled her arm, but she could barely move it a little, surprising her. Bell sweated slightly, it was a level 3 against the strength of a level 4, he could barely hold Asfi's arm and felt that at any moment he would let go. Hermes. That was enough, thank you, looking at her. Asfi stopped struggling and Bell let go of her arm, keeping his face calm. Bell. What's going on? Looking at Hermes. Hermes. He hides it well, I must admit, but I know that at any moment you can break, looking at Bell, Urano sent me, he needs to know if you are going to continue helping him return the Xenos to the dungeon, smiling, I know you are going through a lot with well, I know you are going through a lot, but still Urano sent me to know your answer, looking at him seriously. Hermes observed Bell's face, he was surprised by how he was keeping his face calm and serene, but it was easy to see the sadness in his eyes, as if he was walking lost in the fog, lost in old memories, many of them better than others. Bell. Hermes was patient, he observed Bell calmly, waiting for a response from him. He didn't want to pressure him more than he already was. One false step and that hero he so wanted to see grow would fall into a dark hole from which he wouldn't be able to help him get out. Bell remained silent for several more seconds, being watched by Asfi and his family, who had already recovered from what had happened. Wiene. I wish all the Xenos were safe and happy. Just like me when I'm with you and the others. Bell. We will continue helping, looking at him, we will help the Xenos. Hermes smiled slightly, he could see it, even within that storm of sadness inside Bell there was a small light, a small flame that struggled to burn again with the same intensity as before. Hermes. Then I will inform Uranos, the fool will send you a letter shortly giving you instructions to help the Xenos, smiling. Bell. Where are they? Looking at him. Hermes. They are hidden and scattered throughout Daedalus, the Loki family is secretly searching for them, but hasn't been able to find anything, although it won't be long before they find them, so we must hurry, seriously. Bell. Yes, we will help as much as possible, looking at him. Hermes. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you again, Bell, smiling, let's go like this. Leaving. Asfi followed her god and closed the door leaving the mansion. Bell. I'm sorry, I should have come in earlier, looking at everyone. Lily. Don't worry Bell-sama, they need more than a blow to the back of the head to hurt Lily, walking beside her. Welf. Yes, my friend, that barely tickled me, smiling confidently. Lily. Well, like me, I saw you fall completely to the ground with that attack, mockingly. Welf. Lilicuajo, you couldn't even react, frowning. Welf and Lily started fighting as usual while being watched by the others. Hestia. Are you sure Bell-kun? Looking at him, if you want to help the Xenos, I won't, but it's very risky for everyone, especially for you, worried. Paraham. It's okay. Lily. What do you mean, is she okay? Looking at her. Paraham Wiene she wanted to see the Xenos happy and safe, looking up, please let's help them. Everyone looked at Haraham, her eyes were red and swollen from crying so much, but her gaze reflected confidence and determination, she wanted to help the Xenos, for Wiene. Bell looked at everyone expectantly, his answer was obvious. Makoto. We'll gladly help you, Bell Dono. Haraham Dono. Smiling. Lily. Lily would go with you to hell if necessary Bell-sama, sighing, since, in any case, we always get into trouble. Welf. You stole my words, smiling, count me in, raising his thumb. Hestia. Well I am your goddess, so you have my support, smiling, then let's wait for Fels to send us a message, for now you can prepare whatever you want, looking at them. Everyone nodded and left the room, they had a lot to do or a lot to think about. In one of the hallways of the fireplace mansion, there was a certain white-haired man leaning against the window, watching the rain fall from the sky. I lowered my gaze lightly, observing the Welfreak, from afar I could hear the slight clash of metals as they hammered. He could also see Lily passing the fence around the mansion with a box full of vegetables and greens for dinner, although she was transformed into a small elf with pale green hair and a brown cloak, so no one would recognize her, and she would save herself trouble. Bell couldn't help but darken his gaze. Because of him the family could now not freely go out into the city without receiving dirty looks and the occasional insult. He didn't care about his reputation in the least. He didn't regret helping the Xenos, and he wouldn't regret it, but his family was being affected, and that started to make him doubt. Bell. I don't want anyone else to get hurt, clenching his fists, but I don't want to abandon the Xenos. I promised them. I promised Wiene, looking at the sky. Why couldn't I be stronger? Bell gritted his teeth and sighed. It was no use complaining, nothing was going to be fixed just by complaining. But he didn't know what to do. He could only stare at the rain, melancholically, remembering a certain vouivre who was no longer by his side. Wiene. What's that? What's that? Excited. Bell. It's rain, smiling. Wiene. Woo. Looking surprised, I love it. Smiling. Bell. Yes, it's reassuring, smiling. It doesn't rain very often in the daytime, so people learn to appreciate the rain. What do you say if we go out? But let's put on our salamander capes or are we going to get wet? Wiene. Running, that's great. Spreading her arms. Bell. Wiene. Wait. Running after her. Bell. Looking at the rain. Hestia. Sighing, they say that rain is good, but sometimes I feel that it only appears in bad times, looking at the rain. Lily put a basket with everything she had bought on the table and also looked at the window. Lily. A bad omen or a good omen, it depends on what happens next, I guess. Squinting, that's not the one. Hestia. Looking at the window, Bell. Lily and Hestia were excited to see Bell walking in the rain with his gaze lost in the sky. Hestia. Ah. Bell. Shaking her arms. Lily. Bell-sama. Exalted. The door to Bell's room opened and the aforementioned came out completely dry with a change of clothes and a towel on his head. After a scolding from Hestia and being sent to bathe, he went for a walk around the mansion while he waited to be called to eat. Bell suddenly stopped and turned his gaze seeing Hera in one of the mansion's hallways, watching the melancholic rain, just like him a few minutes ago. Bell walked towards her and stood beside her, also looking at the rain. Hera. She really liked the rain. Bell. He loved playing under it. Hera. I remember the time she ran all over the yard getting wet, sniff why you were running after her while she smiled, trembling. Hera's voice broke, she tried to stop it, but her eyes moistened and a tear quickly fell from her left eye. Hera looked away, not wanting Bell to see her in such a miserable way, but she opened her eyes in surprise when she felt two arms wrap around her and give her a comforting feeling of warmth and security. Her head was on Bell's chest, listening with her sharp hearing to the beating of his heart. It was quiet, the soft sound of its beating was strangely soothing to her. Hera closed her eyes and hugged Bell back, even though some tears continued to flow from her eyes as she remembered Wiene, the little monster who had won all her affection. Before, Hera and Bell would have blushed profusely and apologized to each other for such an approach, but now. Both had suffered a lot from the loss of Wiene, they were depressed because of it, so much so that the closeness that in the past would have filled them with shame, now filled them with warmth and nostalgia of those days where they spent time with Wiene taking care of her and teaching her about the world outside the dungeon. They had been the ones who had gotten closest to Wiene, the ones who had grown most attached to her, and the ones who were suffering the most from the loss of the little girl they had loved like a little sister or even like a daughter. Hera. I'm sorry, hugging him tightly, I saw how you went out to the courtyard getting wet sniff, I wanted to go comfort you, but I was afraid that I wouldn't say the right words Andy, crying, now you're here comforting me sniff and I can't do anything to help you, I haven't done anything to help anyone sniff, I couldn't help the Xenos in any way clenching her fists, I couldn't be there to protect Wiene, I didn't do anything to help them, trembling. Bell. It's not true. Bell tightened the hug a little and pressed his head against Hera's. Bell. You have been a great help to everyone, to the family, to the Xenos, you were to Wiene, and to me too, don't look down on yourself, Wiene would have been sad if she saw you like this, don't you think? Bell raised his head and took Hera by the chin, so that she would look into his eyes. Bell. You were very important in all of this, so please don't blame yourself. Bell smiled slightly, trying to give a reassuring smile to Hera, who looked at him with light in her eyes, like that time when he had saved her from being a sacrifice. Bell. Smile, okay. Wiene and I don't like to see you sad. Hera opened her eyes, tried to speak, but only felt a lump in her throat, she began to tear up before hugging Bell and giving a small, weak smile. Hera. Yes, sorry for worrying you, squeezing the hug, Wiene I promise to be stronger and keep the Xenos safe, I promise you. Her sadness and pain wouldn't disappear overnight, but she had heard the words she needed today, and that had helped her a lot to get out of her sadness, even if it was momentary it had been a breakthrough. I don't want to interrupt, Bell dono, Hera dono, but dinner is already ready. Hera blushed slightly and glanced at Makoto who was at the end of the hall looking at them with a small gathering of embarrassment on her face. Bell. We'll go in a second, looking at her. Makoto nodded and left, leaving them alone again. Bell. Let's eat, shall we? Smiling slightly. Hera nodded and together they went to the dining room where the others were waiting for them. Fireplace mansion room. Even though they had a large dining room for at least 100 members, they didn't use it because it was very lonely, so instead they did almost everything in small rooms. Right now they were in a room right next to the kitchen with a large table and several padded wooden chairs. Everyone was sitting there except for Welf, who was still hammering in his freak. Lily went to leave him some food outside the freak. They were eating quietly, and as usual, Lily always fought with Hestia or with Welf. Makoto was talking happily with a calm Hera. She was glad to see her less depressed than before, she was still a little sad, but at least now she didn't seem like she was about to cry at any second. Bell watched everything in silence, like a simple spectator, even though his face didn't seem to reflect anything, he felt happy to see that Wiene's death wasn't affecting them too much. Did it anger him that they didn't seem that affected by Wiene? Not at all, he could be someone shy, but he wasn't an idiot, he knew that everyone was suffering, and they were doing their best to keep their spirits up, even if they hadn't spent as much time with Wiene as he or Hera had, everyone loved her, and everyone felt hurt by her death. So he was slightly pleased to see that everyone was trying to cheer themselves up again, living together as a family. Bell. All of this, looking at everyone. Hi, sorry for the delay. Welf entered the room with a tray of food and sat next to Lily and Makoto to eat. Lily. Oh. Weren't you working? Looking at him. Welf. You need a break from time to time, right? Smiling. Makoto. It's good to see him eating with us. Welf Dono, smiling. Welf. Well, I have to coexist even if it's just a little, right? Smiling. Hey, pass me something to drink, I'm really dying of thirst. The place was filled with life, everyone was living together as a family, they were overcoming their pain together. Bell. All this is what I want to protect, smiling, I don't want to lose anyone else again, I will protect you, no matter the cost, I promise. Unbeknownst to him, with that promise came a new goal, one he would strive to achieve even more than the last. Even with all this, achieving a new goal would not make your problems disappear. It was already night, almost everyone was asleep with the exception of the always ardent who was in his frigwa hammering like in the morning. In a certain white-haired man's room, Bell was lying in his bed sleeping, but from his expression, it was obvious that it wasn't a nice dream. Bell. Frowning in his sleep. Bell. Bell opened his eyes, but he wasn't in his room, he was in that Coliseum, that place where the little Wiene had died. Bell, co. Bell stood still and slowly turned back, seeing Wiene in horror, his body covered in wounds and a spear piercing his chest. Wiene extended her arm towards him, and Bell quickly tried to take her hand, but it turned into nothing more than dust when he was about to take it. Bell slowly backed away in shock until his feet stepped on something strange and he looked down at it. But when he did so he was struck dumb by the sight of the lifeless body of an adventurer, covered in blood and with a deformed face. Bastard. Bell turned around and saw a black-haired man with a sword, his partner. You did that to him, how dare you? Bell and Nomi, backing away. The adventurer advanced towards him angrily, suddenly in his hand he had the severed and deformed head of that adventurer. You did that to him. Bell suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up from his bed as sweat ran down his face. He was breathing heavily while holding his head. Bell gritted his teeth in frustration and sat on the edge of the bed to calm down, he looked out the window and saw the starry sky. Quickly a memory emerged from him. Wiene. What is that? Curious. Bell. They are the stars, smiling, all those dots in the sky are stars that only come out at night. Wiene. Wow, they're great. I want to touch one. Spreading her arms. Bell. You can't touch them, laughing lightly. Wiene. Why not? Pouting. Bell. They are very far from us, they are unreachable, looking at the sky. Wiene. Disappointed. Bell. Even so we are lucky, smiling, to be able to see something like this, it's very beautiful, don't you think? Wiene. Yes, looking at the sky, it's very beautiful. Smiling. Bell. Let's go inside before Hera gets worried, smiling. Wiene. Hi. Smiling. Bell clenched his fists, a tear fell from his left eye and he looked down in frustration, why did everything remind him of her, everything he did, everything he saw, everything brought back a painful memory of her. From her smile, from that smile that she couldn't protect because of her weakness, her incompetence, her naivety, her immaturity. Bell. I'm a hypocrite. He remembered the words he had said to Hera so that she would not blame him for what had happened and could smile again and overcome her sadness a little. He felt like a real hypocrite because he was doing the same thing, he was blaming himself for all of this, but in this case it really was his fault, or that's what he thought. If only I had been there to protect her, if only I hadn't hesitated, if only I had been stronger none of this would have happened. The nightmares were the punishment he was receiving for not being able to do anything, the punishment he had accepted. Bell lay back down in his bed listening to the constant hammering coming from Wilf's fret. In any other case it could be annoying, but now it was a little quiet. It was much more reassuring than his nightmares. It reminded him that he still had his friends and that he should protect them. Bell closed his eyes ready to sleep, knowing perfectly well that as soon as he slept again that nightmare would relive. I accepted as the punishment he had to receive for his weakness. The punishment that he, according to him, deserved. Discomfort Chapter 2. Things were really okay. No, he was sure of that. It wasn't okay at all. He felt like at any moment those nightmares would drive him crazy. Seeing the same scene over and over again every night wasn't something to be taken lightly. The scene of his death, of how he brutally beat that adventurer, constantly haunted him in his dreams. Did I do anything to prevent it? Absolutely not. It was his punishment. It was what he deserved for being weak and pathetic. It was his sentence, one he had accepted with guilt. Bell opened his eyes heavily, looked around. He was in his body. He couldn't help but feel a great relief when he saw that. It meant that his nightmare was over. He stood up and looked at his hands. They looked normal, but for a few moments they were stained with blood. He no longer knew if this was his imagination or if he was going crazy. Bell got out of bed tired. He had dark circles under his eyes. This had been going on for 3 nights, and Wiene's death had happened 4 days ago because of him. He stood up and put on his brown boots before opening the door and going out into the hallway. He looked normal, calm. I could hear the bird singing and the sound of a sword heading towards the. Bell opened his eyes and looked out of the corner of his eye as a sword approached his neck ready to cut it. He raised his hand and quickly conjured his magic, launching a beam of fire towards his enemy towards nothingness. Bell stepped back and blinked in confusion. Where was he? He looked around, but there seemed to be no one. He looked at the direction where the fire beam was sent, and there in the wall, there was a small hole destroyed and with small flames from the fire attack. Bell lowered his hand slowly as he breathed heavily, sweat running down his face, and he could feel goosebumps on his skin. It was so real his instincts went into complete alarm and warned him of the danger immediately, but there was nothing left. Bell. What happened? Breathing heavily. Bell tried to remember. Yes, the sword was approaching his neck ready to decapitate him, but whose weapon was it? Suddenly he remembered. It was the same weapon that the second adventurer had, whom he had only beaten a little 4 days ago. Bell covered his eyes with both hands as he tried to calm his breathing. His eyes burned from lack of sleep, and his body felt very heavy, almost as if he had 10 layers of black Goliath skin on top of him. He lowered his hands and opened his eyes only to stare in disbelief and fear at someone standing a few feet in front of him. It was the adventurer he had frantically beaten before was there in front of him with his face deformed and dripping with blood. He had no eye. It seemed that his eye had exploded from one of his punches. Most of his teeth were lost or faces, and his jaw was broken. His nose seemed to be buried inside his own face, and his skull was sunken in a horrendous way. Bell took a shaky step back. The adventurer looked up at him and slowly extended a hand. Please help. The adventurer could not finish speaking when suddenly a white blur appeared and took him away. Bell was alarmed by this and quickly started running in the same direction where he had seen that blur. He turned a corner and saw a wooden door to that hallway slam shut. It was the Welf weapons room, where he kept all the weapons that didn't fit in his forge. Bell walked towards that door and slowly took the knob. HHH. Bell became excited and quickly opened the door, freezing at what he saw. There he was, the adventurer was on the ground with several swords, knives and other weapons buried all over his body. On top of him was a white-haired man hitting him roughly while laughing at his face that looked anything but a human face. Suddenly the white-haired man stopped laughing and hitting to turn to look at him. Bell took a step back in fear, seeing himself there on top of the adventurer with bloodstains on his clothes and face. Bell. Are you joining? Laughing. Ham. Bell slammed the door shut as he breathed heavily. He was hallucinating. He was definitely hallucinating, wasn't he? Still he felt like vomiting when he remembered that scene, the motionless corpse of the adventurer pierced by hundreds of weapons, with his face completely destroyed and deformed by the same. Ha ha ha. Bell felt a strong chill as he heard a sinister laugh coming from behind the door, a laugh that came from the other Bell. Bell began to tremble as he heard footsteps approaching the door. He tightened his grip on the knob, but nothing happened. Bell. Bell became excited and turned his gaze to see Welf, who had a weapon in his arms wrapped in a blanket so that it could not be seen. Welf. Are you okay? Worried, I heard the sound of a small explosion and went to see what was happening. I only saw the hole from your firebolt, and then I came to my weapons storage. Is everything okay? Looking at him. Bell. Huh. Why yes, everything is fine. Welf. Damn, friend, you're just as bad as me or worse, laughing slightly. L.A. Bell looked up to see Welf. He looked exhausted, he had dark circles under his eyes, and it was normal, he had literally been working day and night in his fret making who knows what, probably magic swords. Bell. Just some nightmares, looking away. Welf. I recommend you find a quiet place and sleep. If you have nightmares, make sure you do something that makes you happy or have fun before sleeping, it will help keep the nightmares away, smiling. Bell. Yes, thanks for the advice, looking at him. Welf. Well, I'll go leave this for now, opening the door. Bell. Wait, Welf. Bell tried to stop Welf, but it was too late, and Welf opened the door completely finding nothing. Welf. Huh? What's going on? Confused. Bell. No, nothing, just, I think the lack of sleep is making me see things, looking down, I'll go get some sleep, leaving. Welf. Rest, my friend, really, looking at him. Bell nodded in the distance and returned to his room, to his daily torture. Dining room. In the dining room of the mansion they were all gathered eating, well, it seemed like a custom, but as always there was someone missing. Hestia internally worried the emptying of Bell, these 3 days he had been distant and it seemed that with each day that feeling increased. Hestia wasn't the only one to notice, everyone noticed it too and was worried about Bell. Welf told them what happened and Lily suspected that Bell was having some nightmares because of Wiene. Unfortunately they did not know everything that had happened, neither Bell nor Fels told them, they only knew that in that Colosseum Wiene had died and that. Hestia. Well, as much as I would like to help him, I am not the right one, sighing. Hera. EA. Looking at her. Lily. It's true, we won't be of any help to Bell-sama, sighing disappointedly. Hera. But what are they saying, so who will do it? Worried. Everyone turned to look at her, and Hera quickly understood the message. She swallowed hard but quickly nodded, Bell had comforted her days ago, and now she had to return the favor, besides she didn't want her hero to blame himself for something that wasn't his fault, she wanted to see him smile again, happy, joyful. Hera stood up and took a metal tray with Bell's food, she was going to take it to him. He left the dining room leaving the place in silence. Welf. Are we really not going to do anything? Looking at everyone. Hestia. Not at the moment, sighing, let Hera help Bell in any way she can, if he manages to improve even a little we will also go to help him, but for now it is better that Hera takes charge, she is the one who best understands the pain he is going through for losing Wiene. Everyone nodded and went back to eating, this time in complete silence. Bell's room. In Bell's room was the aforementioned lying on his bed with a lost look. Bell. 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 Bell narrowed his eyes slightly, listening to Wiene's voice echo in his head. He turned his gaze slightly and saw how there beside him was another white-haired man lying, stained with blood. The other also looked at him and smiled slightly before raising his hand and directing it towards his face. Bell tried to move, he did his best to move his body, but he couldn't even move a finger, he couldn't even move his head anymore. He began to sweat, his breathing became labored, and his body began to tremble. Every time the other Bell's hand came closer to his face, he could perfectly smell the blood on the other's hand that dripped on his black shirt. Finally the other's hand was about to take his face, but suddenly. Talk. Bell suddenly opened his eyes and got up from the bed while breathing heavily. Bell. What? Looking around. There was nothing, he could move now and he couldn't see the other Bell anywhere. Bell. Was it a nightmare? Breathing heavily. Bell shook his head and let out a tired sigh, he didn't even know when he was awake and when he was asleep. Talk. Bell turned to look at the door doubtfully, not knowing who was behind it. Bell. Go ahead. The door to her room opened making Bell sweat. Hera. Bell-sama. Passando. Bell breathed a sigh of relief and sat on the bed looking at Hera. Bell. What's going on? Looking at her. Hera wrinkled her face with concern, Bell looked terrible, the dark circles under his eyes so marked from not being able to sleep, his white hair completely messed up and his movements slack and heavy. Hera approached him and placed the metal tray on a nightstand before sitting on the bed next to Bell. Hera. What are your nightmares like, Bell-sama? Looking at him. Bell. I never said I had nightmares. Hera. It's not difficult to notice and Welf-sama told us, we are worried about you, worried. Bell. I am fine, smiling slightly. Suddenly Hera hugged Bell who opened his eyes in surprise, she hugged him the same way he hugged her days ago, with the difference that now it was he who had his head resting on Hera's chest. Hera. I'm sorry, I should have realized it before Bell-sama, I should have noticed how he blames himself for what happened, tightening the hug. Bell closed his eyes to prevent the tears from escaping from his eyes and hugged Hera. He liked this feeling of being comforted by a loved one, of feeling this warmth to hug her body once more. Bell. She was in front of me, clenching his fists, she was in front of me sniff and she can't do anything, trembling, I let her die. Hera. It's not true you didn't let her die, you protected her more than anyone and tried to save her. Bell, I tried. But sniff, I didn't make it, I was weak. Haraham. Then become strong, looking at him. Bell raised his face and looked at Haraham, who was looking into his eyes seriously. Haraham. Keep moving forward and don't let this break you, Bell-sama, become stronger and don't let this happen again. Grieve, we're all doing it, but don't forget that you still have us. Wiene would have been saddened to see you like this, remember that. Bell. Hoo. This time Bell couldn't hold back and cried freely, remembering that little girl who spent her time running and laughing, happy to learn new things with him. I let the tears fall down my chin, wetting Haraham's maid clothes, who didn't care at all, and continued to hug Bell. Haraham. You look very tired, Bell-sama. Haraham began to caress Bell's head, brushing his hair and giving it a pleasant sensation on his head. Bell slowly closed his eyes in peace, he felt calm, he no longer felt chills throughout his body, and he felt warm. Bell. It's nice, closing his eyes. Then Bell fell asleep after 3 days of insomnia and nightmares, he finally managed to sleep peacefully, without fear, and without a horrible nightmare. Haraham smiled slightly as she saw Bell sleeping in her arms, he looked so calm and peaceful, that made her happy since she had done it, she was there helping her hero. Haraham. Rest, Bell-sama. Wiene. Hug. Smiling. Haraham smiles. Bell. Who. Blushing. Haraham smiled slightly and wiped away a small tear that escaped from her eye, she really missed her. Knock. A single knock sounded on the door and Haraham looked at it curiously. Haraham. Go ahead. The door opened and revealed Makoto, who smiled upon seeing Bell sleeping. Makoto. I see that things went well with Bell Dono, I'm glad, smiling. Haraham. Yes, smiling, what do you need? Curious. Makoto. Right, Lily says she got a letter from Fels, apparently it has a hidden message that Lily is deciphering, so she still has time to rest, looking at Bell, I'll let you know later, closing the door. Haraham nodded and looked at Bell. Haraham. We'll be by your side, no matter what happens. Haraham closed her eyes and fell asleep next to Bell, both having a beautiful dream together with a little smiling vouivre. Meeting room. What did you discover, Lily? In the meeting room, the entire Hestia family was gathered with Lily, who was writing on a piece of paper a hidden message that was in Fels' letter. Lily. Well, it was a bit difficult, Bell-sama, but nothing I couldn't solve, stopping writing. Lily looked at Bell, he looked better than before, he still had dark circles under his eyes, and he looked tired, but he was better, and that was enough. She took the paper where Fels wrote the hidden message, and Welf took it. Welf. Tomorrow night we'll go to the gate to Nasso's on Daedalus Street. We hope to count on your help. Hestia took the paper and continued reading. Hestia. Prepare useful magic items for the operation that's what it says, but. Lily. She looks like an evil god guiding us to our destruction, and I'm Droplet. Bell. Never mind, shaking his head, sorry for bringing you into this, but would you join me one more time to solve a problem? Seriously. Everyone looked at Bell in silence, but it didn't take long for them to smile at him graciously. Lily. Since here we go again, shrugging her shoulders. Makoto. I may be the first to fall, but count me in, Bell Dono. Smiling confidently. Hestia. You have the support of your trusty goddess. Giving her a thumbs up. Welf. Well, what does it matter, it's just another day in the Hestia family, calm down. Haraham. Getting into trouble is becoming our specialty, smiling slightly. Welf. It's good that I was doing these. Welf showed a small sword and unsheathed it, it was white and light blue, and had a very striking design, it was a magic sword. Welf. I have 3 more in the workshop, smiling proudly. Lily. 4 swords in 4 days. Well, I guess that's okay, looking away in disappointment. Welf. Hey. Making a magic sword is difficult, that he made one in just 1 day is something to admire, crossing his arms, also, I thought about what they said, we shouldn't destroy the city, or they would blame us more, so they are magic swords of ice element, they don't destroy, they only freeze too much, but they don't destroy, and I'm drop. Hestia. Fine. Motivated, we'll help the Xenos. Extending her hand. Welf, Lily, Makoto and Haraham placed their hands on top of Hestia's and then looked at their captain who was silent. Bell. I want to apologize for getting you into this and also thank you for supporting me, looking up, we're going to be successful, and I assure you of it. Bell extended his hand and stacked it next to the others, they would help the Xenos and everything would be okay, Bell was the one who was going to make sure of that. Daedalus Street hidden hideout in a hidden alley. In that desolate alley there were several monsters in complete silence, Xenos, there were some like Groz the Gargoyle, Lid the Lizardman, Ray the Siren, Laura the Lamia and 2 others. Everyone looked sad, frustrated. The reason was obvious. The death of Vienna. Despite having known the little girl very little, they had grown fond of her, she was one of their own, so she was like someone from their family. They felt like a fiasco, especially Groz, Lid and Ray. They had come to the surface to help Bell rescue Wiene, but were easily stopped by the Loki family. If it weren't for Asterius and the god Hermes, they would not have gotten out of there and probably would have been captured, but even so, they failed to do anything to save Wiene. Fels had told them how her death happened, how they ambushed her and Bell and killed Wiene. None of the three could imagine how Bell must have felt. He was the closest to her and the one who had grown most fond of her. He had surely been affected by seeing her die in front of him. That's why they doubted a lot that they would help them. They doubted that the Hestia family would do anything more to help them go to the dungeon, and they wouldn't blame them. They had already done so much for them. They had put their safety and public image at risk for them, especially Bell. He defended Wiene in plain sight, without even thinking about the consequences, and suffered Wiene's death. It had already been too much for them. They were grateful. Since they existed, no one had ever done so much for them. Many others had lived with Xenos in the past, but none ever dared to risk their skin for them until Bell arrived. They were more than grateful for their help, but they doubted that they would be given that help again now, and they would be more than happy to be denied it. They had already done so much for them and they had already suffered so much. They would not get them into more of their problems anymore. It was time for them to solve them, on their own. Lid turned to look at Fels, who was standing there next to them in silence. He had noticed that Fels also seemed to be sad and thoughtful. Lid approached him to talk, but suddenly a white owl arrived and gave Fels a letter along with a small purple bag. Fels took it and began to read it silently, while taking out of the small bag a strange medium-sized blue marble. Lid. What is that, Fels? Looking at him. Bros, Ray and the others also looked at him with curiosity. Fels. The Hestia family will help us escape, turning to look at them. Everyone opened their eyes. Really? Would they really still support them? Would they still have their support after all? Lid. Really? Will Belkai and the others come to help? Looking at him. Fels. Yes, one of them will be the bait and will attract as many adventurers as possible to a location far from us. Then they must call their own and meet in Knossos. Then we will wait there for the orders of Hestia-sama, who has a map of Knossos. And Hermes-sama will accompany us to help. Ray. But who's the bait? Raising an eyebrow. Fels. The adventurer who raises the most suspicions, bellcranel. Serious. Lid. You've got to be kidding. Excited. We can't let Belkai be the bait, not with all she's done already. Distressed. Ray. That's true, Fels. This is very low. He must already be suffering a lot with Wiene's death, and now he also has to help us by being the bait. Frowning. Bros boy. Fels. I'm sorry, but it's the only way. No one would raise more suspicions than bellcranel. Besides, this was his idea. It was his decision. If we refuse, we would ruin it, so we have no choice but to trust Bell. Looking at them, please trust in that adventurer who always finds a way to overcome any challenge. Bros. Let's trust the boy. Looking at them. Lid A. Looking at him in surprise. Bros. He has shown me his will to protect us when he faced the idiot with a strange eye. I trust that I managed to overcome the death of the little girl, and his will becomes stronger than ever, so I will trust that human who showed me his loyalty and commitment, seriously. Lid smiled slightly and nodded, along with Ray, who looked at Fels determinedly. Ray. Then we better be ready to return the favor to the boy, don't you think? Smiling. Bros looking away. Fels looked at them thoughtfully. Bell suffered a lot with Wiene's death. It was easy to notice that the adventurer with a strong will had broken after the death of someone important to him, but he would also trust that he would overcome it and his already strong will would become unbreakable. Fels. We can only trust him, looking at the blue sphere. H-la. Hello. A little distorted. Fels. I'm listening, bellcranel, looking at the blue stone. And with that, the mission began. Helping the Xenos Chapter 3. Daedalus. On Daedalus Street there were several abandoned watchtowers that were being used temporarily by the Loki family as an operations center and to have a better view of the whole place. In one of those towers were Finn Damon, Riveria Ljos Alf, Aiz Waldstein and some other adventurers looking at a map on a stone table that was there. Finn. Okay, here's the plan. Finn looked at everyone around him seriously. It was almost nightfall, and it was likely that today would be the day the monsters would try to return to the dungeon. His intuition told him, or rather his thumb, he felt that today would be the day the monsters would try to return to the dungeon, and that was something they could not allow, because besides being strange specimens they had to kill some. Reason? Simple, they had to recover their honor. The news of a Minotaur defeating 3 of their executives, Tiona, Tyan, Bet and the Sword Princess, had been a blow to their reputation. Adventurers and citizens alike were beginning to question whether the Loki family truly deserved the title of one of the strongest families in Arario. Something that bothered Finn every time he heard it while walking or watching the surroundings. They had to recover their honor and their reputation as one of the strongest families. He didn't know Bell's reasons for protecting those monsters. The only thing different about them was that they were stronger than normal ones, much stronger, but now he didn't care. They had to kill those monsters, and many others thought the same, like Tyan and Bet, who after their defeat had been furious. Aiz also seemed annoyed. That black minotaur had severely damaged her left shoulder. It was even able to penetrate her armor and send her flying. According to Aiz, her right arm still felt numb from the monster's strength. And that's why they were a danger. Finn. Those monsters are extremely dangerous. Some of you experienced it firsthand. Several had the strength of level 5 like the gargoyle or the lizardman, and that minotaur. At the mention of that monster everyone became serious, some tensed and others got nervous. Bet and Tyan seemed to growl, and Aiz sharpened his gaze. Finn. That monster was able to fight on par with Aiz without one of its arms, and Aiz is our best attacker against monsters. It is dangerous. If you see it, do not attack alone. Ask for reinforcements and wait for them to arrive. Do not attack it if there are not at least 2 level 5 or level 6 with you, seriously. Everyone nodded, looking at their captain. They had heard what that minotaur was capable of, and that scared them. He had defeated 3 level 5s without much effort and fought on par with Aiz. They had also heard his fierce battle cry that he gave at the beginning of the fight. That cry was so loud that it caused a great current of air around it that everyone could feel. Finn. It's almost certain that at night is when the monsters will try to return to the dungeon. Daedalus is a place with many labyrinths, dead ends and secret passages, and we don't know if the Hestia family knows more than us, so several groups will be patrolling, seriously. Riveria. Also in Knossos. Looking at it. Finn. The hole they came out of was connected to a room in Knossos. It's almost certain they know about that place and are trying to use it to escape. We know the 4 entrances, so we have the advantage over them. I have a group of several adventurers standing guard at each of the exits, who immediately alert in case they see something. Looking at the map, Rao and others are in the second tower keeping watch. They will inform us if they see something. Aerith is in Knossos keeping guard in the corridors we know. Riveria, you command a surveillance group in Daedalus. Tyan will go with you, seriously. Tyan. But Captain, I wanted to fight again. Finn. Silence Tyan, it was an order, serious. Tyan fell silent and lowered her head in silence, yet the person sitting next to her had a little bit of excitement when he saw a small blush on her cheeks. Finn. Bet, you will also take a scouting group and watch the area of the second tower, looking at him. That clicked his tongue but said nothing, he just resigned himself and agreed to command a group of weaklings as he called them. Then Aiz, you will stay here watching the surroundings. If you see something I will immediately inform you so I can give you new orders. Seriously, the same goes for everyone. Do not hesitate to inform me or Riveria about what you see or hear, understood? Hi. Taichu. Finn nodded pleased and ordered everyone to go to their posts with his instructions established. Aiz. If the Minotaur appears, what will we do? Looking at him. Finn looked up and turned to see her. He could notice that anger in her. She wasn't very expressive, but her eyes showed more than her face, and he had taken care of her since she was a child, so it was a little easy for him, Riveria and Gareth, to know what Aiz was thinking or feeling, even if Aiz herself didn't know it. Finn. In that case, it is a higher priority to finish him off than the others. If possible, I would like to capture the other monsters, but we must kill some, and the Black Minotaur, he must not live, seriously. Aiz nodded and turned to look at Daedalus in silence. In her mind still hovered a white-haired adventurer who had left her confused. He still remembered it. He still remembered those red eyes that he had seen several times in his training. And she still remembered the way he looked at her when he protected the monster. Bell, he was threatening her. His look gave a clear warning message for her not to get close to the vouivre. Bell. She's my prey. Exalted. Aiz put a hand to her chest and slightly wrinkled her face in disgust as she remembered that event. She felt a small pressure in her chest and had a strange feeling of anguish in her that she disliked. Aiz. Bell, looking at the sky. Finn watched Aiz in silence, just as Riveria had noticed Aiz's closeness to the peculiar-looking boy. At first he liked him, he seemed trustworthy and someone innocent and kind, and in all the time he lived with Aiz he had managed to make her open up more with people, something that took him, Riveria and the others years to do. He did it in a few weeks. He made Aiz become more open, he made Aiz have his affection and appreciation. But now. Unfortunately, and although it sounded a little bad, he was an enemy, at least for now. Whatever his reasons for protecting those beasts, they had to eliminate them. Then Aiz and he could solve their conflicts when this was over. Finn. It's almost nightfall, watching the sunset. Get ready now, I'll need you ready to hunt some monsters in case they appear, serious. Aiz blinked, stopped looking at the sky and nodded expressionlessly, but Finn still noticed that she was slightly distracted in her thoughts. Briaya. Finn narrowed his eyes and looked around, a loud roar echoed through the place, after that several more began to sound like a signal. Finn. They're gathering, seriously, but where? Along with the first roar. Or maybe it was just a cry for help from someone else, frowning, where will they go? I need one more clue. Hapiton. Finn. Bingo, what's wrong, Alice? Looking at her. Alice. Several family members saw bellcranel walking through the streets of Daedalus, it would be. Finn. Well, he acted quickly, where is he going? Looking at her. Alicia. It's heading northeast, do we capture it? Finn. No, I'm sure it's a distraction, so if it goes northeast it means the monsters are going southwest. Send a small group to entertain bellcranel, have the others go southwest and look for the monsters. They are scattered throughout Daedalus, so they will probably gather in the opposite direction to which Bell is going. Serious. Alicia. Hi. Alicia ran off to give the warning, leaving Aiz and Finn in a small silence. Aiz. Found. Finn. You're very aware of your learner, Aiz, are you going to help him? Looking at her. Aiz. No, but I want to know why are you helping them, squinting. Why is he helping those monsters? Past is the, whispering. Follow him, whispering. Don't lose sight of him, whispering. Several adventurers began to follow a certain white-haired man who was walking a few meters ahead of them in silence. His steps were normal and he didn't seem to pay attention to them. Several smiled at this, thinking they had him in the palm of their hand. They drew their weapons, ready to attack and capture him, even though their captain had told them that they were only supposed to entertain them. No one thought they deserved such kind treatment after all the recent destruction of homes and the wounded citizens and adventurers. For allowing the vouivre to escape was bellcranel's fault. Just as they were about to attack him, Bell suddenly ran away. What? Quickly catch him. Don't let him escape. They all started chasing him, some with more advantage than others, but all with the same objective. Bell ran through alleys, jumped across rooftops, and went through secret passages that a certain dangerous person had shown him in the past. But he still wasn't able to lose the adventurers. They were all irrelevant. What really mattered was Bell. Aiz-san. Bell turned his head slightly and looked out of the corner of his eye at a golden-haired girl running across the roofs of the houses and larger buildings. Aiz was barely running, she was following him. Bell stopped looking at Aiz and then turned to look at the adventurers. Bell. Not long now, looking ahead. Suddenly, Bell moved to an open area where there was a destroyed fountain in the center. The adventurers followed him there and looked around in confusion. Isn't it? It's impossible that he managed to escape so quickly in such an open place. Look for him. Wait. It's there. What? Where? Ah. There are many monsters. Where? Miatikin. Hubrain. Ah. The adventurers drew their weapons and looked around in terror. Each one was seeing different things and some slightly similar. An adventurer threw himself to the ground and covered his head in terror at the sight of hundreds of minotaurs around him. Another one of them looked around excitedly, seeing hundreds of bells laughing at him, saying that he couldn't catch him. One of them was watching his wife and his lover looking at him furiously. The man fainted. The whole scene was being seen by Aiz, who couldn't help but open her eyes, slightly surprised. Around the open area there was a strange yellow mist that was barely visible. Only her affiliated level 6 eyes were able to notice it. She was on top of a building, so the strange fog wasn't affecting her. While Aiz watched the scene without knowing what to do, in an alley was a certain beast-man dog looking at a strange red and blue flower that released yellow spores. It was Naza, who had a handkerchief on her face that prevented the spores from affecting her as well. Naza. It's an interesting goal, watching the adventurers hallucinate. I wonder how you got something like that, Bell, looking at floor. Speaking of the rabbit. Aiz watched as Bell emerged from the destroyed fountain with a handkerchief on his face, preventing the strange mist from affecting him. Bell quickly ran towards the exit of the place, and Aiz followed him immediately until her instincts warned her of the danger, and Aiz jumped back, dodging a wooden sword that would have hit her if she hadn't moved. Aiz sharpened her gaze and observed an elf with greenish blonde hair and a strong green cape with flower embroidery. The elf had a wooden sword and was wrapped in a strange yellow glow. Aiz. Who are you? Unsheathing his sword. Ryu. Gale, that's all you need to know. Taking his sword. Now let's have a dual sword, princess, would be. Aiz. Now. Frowning. Ryu. I'm scum in the world. With all the scandal there is, now is the best place and time to fight. Ryu rushed towards Aiz, brandishing his sword. Aiz opened her eyes in surprise at her speed and quickly raised her sword, thinking that the elf would clash swords with her. But she had a big surprise when the elf passed her by without even looking at her. Aiz. Coup. She had to put her thoughts aside and block an attack that was going towards her abdomen. She barely blocked the attack and quickly had to block several more thrusts from the elf, who was running from one side to the other while attacking her. Aiz. His speed is increasing and the power of his attacks too, frowning. They slid back and launched a vertical slash in front of her. Ryu opened his eyes seeing the edge of the sword near his face and quickly raised his sword covering himself from the attack. Crash. The loud bang sounded as both swords collided. Aiz opened her eyes when she saw that the attack pushed her back a little, the power of the elf's attack was greater than hers. And it made sense, she had been running and gaining momentum for her attacks while she just jumped back and attacked her. Still the difference was clear. Ryu felt sweat start to run down his face, even with a level increase he was barely on par with Aiz who hadn't even sweated a small drop. Ryu. I hope I can buy you enough time, Cranel-san, it would be. Ryu tightened his grip on his weapon and launched himself back towards the sky. The only thing that could be heard at the scene was the loud bang of the clashes that both warriors were causing. A certain white-haired man was running through some alleys of Daedalus towards the meeting area. Bell looked at some strange symbols on the walls and followed them, they were like arrows showing him the way. Just as he found the exit of the alley and stepped out he didn't notice that a person was also passing by. Pam. Bell became excited and looked down at a half-elf with long hair sitting on the ground while rubbing her head. Aina. Be more careful please Looking at him, beat Bell. Blinking. Aina-san, looking at her. They both looked at each other in an awkward silence, Bell didn't want to be rude and extended his hand to help her up. Aina looked at him in silence for a few seconds before standing up without taking his hand, her bangs covering her eyes, giving Bell a feeling of insecurity, who felt like she was about to get the scolding of her life. Aina. So everything people have said is true? You let one of those monsters escape? Bell slowly lowered his hand and looked bluntly at Aina. Bell? Yes. Plate. Bell turned his head slightly when he felt one of Aina's hands slap him, he didn't grimace or look away, he just remained silent with his gaze lowered. Aina. Sniff silly. Bell opened his eyes slightly and looked at Aina who was now crying in front of him, Aina used her hands in a futile attempt to stop the tears, but it was of little or no use. Bell raised his hands indecisively, not knowing what to do to stop Aina from crying. Aina. I was very worried sniff when I heard that thanks to you a monster escaped from the Loki family, I was very worried about what would happen to you sniff, wiping away tears, even more so when I heard the damage that was done, you were irresponsible. Clenching his fists. Aina-san yo. Aina. Do you know how worried I was when I found out that monster killed one of the adventurers chasing her? Looking at him with teary eyes. Bell froze upon hearing Aina's words. Had he heard correctly? The monster had killed one of the adventurers chasing them, it was impossible. It had prevented the monster from seriously harming the adventurers behind her, but who then? Bell looked at his trembling right hand, just like before it was stained with blood, although it was only his imagination since Aina couldn't see that. Aina. Sniff I was very worried when I found out how his face was disfigured, it terrifies me to think that could have happened to you sniff. Bell took a step back looking at Aina, it couldn't be or could it? That adventurer he hadn't died and Wiene hadn't attacked him, Fels told him so Fels confirmed that he wasn't dead, he trusted Fels, he knew that he wouldn't lie to him about something like this. True. Bell looked at his body and closed his jaw, slightly trembling at the sight of his entire body stained with blood. Then he looked at Aina, she was still crying and had covered her eyes with her right arm to prevent her tears from being seen anymore. Bell swallowed hard, he didn't want to see her like that, he had worried her a lot and now she was crying in front of him, he had never seen her cry and he didn't want to see her cry because of him. Bell approached her and hugged her slowly, undecided. Bell. I'm sorry. Bell hugged Aina who lowered her arm and looked at him with glassy eyes. Aina couldn't help but hug him back and bury her face in Bell's chest to hide her tears. She thought his words of I'm sorry were to apologize for worrying her, but she didn't know that Bell was actually apologizing for, according to him, staining her with blood. They both stayed like that for a few seconds before Bell broke the hug and wiped Aina's tears with his thumb. Bell. Sorry for worrying you Aina-san, I know it might not sound very believable, but I actually had a good reason to do it, although I can't tell you. Ah. Bellucci. We finally found you. Bell froze upon hearing that voice and turned his gaze, seeing a red lizardman walking calmly towards him with his hand raised in greeting, behind him came a gargoyle, a siren, a goblin, an almira and several more monsters, many more. Aina quickly wiped her tears as best she could and turned to look in the same direction as Bell wondering who he was, her face lost color when she saw all those monsters with armor and weapons in front of them. Aina. Monsters. Backing away. Aina took a few steps back in fear at the sight of the large number of monsters before grabbing Bell by the arm and pulling him to run alongside him. Bell sighed and stood still, he was a level 3 against someone without a fauna, so Aina couldn't even move him a little. Aina. What's going on, Bell? We have to run. Scared. Bell. Please calm down Aina-san, stopping her. Aina. But, trembling. Let me try to explain the situation, Bell. Aina heard a human voice behind her and turned her head a little scared, her already pale face turned completely white when she saw a human skull with a black robe. Fels. Hello, let me introduce myself, I'm Fels. Aina. Ahhhh. Backing away. Aina hid behind Bell, trembling comically as she watched Fels. Aina. Skull. Trembling. L. Were you really more scared of Fels than of Xenos? Incredulous. Fels. Calm down, Miss Aina. Fels pulled a strange emblem from his robes and showed it to Aina, who opened her eyes. Aina. Arano-sama's symbol, looking at the emblem. Fels. That's right, now that he saw the Xenos I have no choice but to explain the situation to him, but we don't have much time, so I'll have to ask him not to tell anyone about this. Bell will probably explain it to him later, looking at Bell. Aina turned to look at Bell looking for answers, and Bell had to ask her to keep the secret. Bell. Aina-san, I need you to keep the secret. They, looking at the monsters, are Xenos, monsters with the ability to think and some with the ability to speak. Some things happened, and a guy who was capturing and hunting them used a magic to drive them crazy. One of them escaped to the surface, and the rest you already know, looking at her. Aina looked at Bell in silence, still processing the fact of the talking monsters. Bell. I have to go, please keep it a secret, backing away. Fels. Yeah, and it's technically an order, showing the emblem. Aina. Okay, lowering her head. Aina slowly left the place before giving Bell one last look and leaving through one of the alleys in silence. Fels. Okay, it's time to go, looking at everyone. Lid. I'm glad to see you again, Bellucci, smiling. Ray. Nice to meet you, Bell-san, smiling. Bell. Hello everyone, smiling slightly. Rose. This is no time for greetings, they're coming. Seriously. At that moment several adventurers began to appear. They were not many, but a considerable amount to be considered a large group. Look. It's bellcranel. And he's accompanied by all the monsters. Quick. Someone go inform Fin-sama. Sound Rayos. L. Don't worry, raising his arm, Mikoto, Welf, take care of them, serious. Immediately Captain. On one of Bell's arm protectors there was one of the communication jewels that was connected to Welf's and Mikoto's. On the other arm he had one that was connected to the jewel that Hestia and Hera had, who were in a small hidden tower, guiding them. L. Let's run, we're going to the hole that connects to Knossos, serious. All the Xenos nodded and Lid raised his sword blocking an arrow that was heading for his head. Quickly everyone ran away being followed by all the adventurers. Rose. We should take care of them, flying. L. Welf will do it, turning around. Not a second later, a huge blast of icy air hit all the adventurers and froze the entire floor and the adventurers' feet, preventing them from running. The draft was so strong that everyone felt as if they had been hit in the face and fainted because of that and the low temperatures. Everyone looked at one of the roofs of a house, seeing Welf with a sky blue sword in his hand. Welf gave Bell a thumbs up before running off to help Mikoto. Rose. Now I see why Asterius always carried a magic weapon. Hestia. Bell. Keep running to the right, there you will find a small group of Xenos who could not meet with you and go all to the Knossos hole. Lily is investigating which entrances are being watched. Bell. Hi, Kami-sama, Sirio. Lid. And Asterius. Looking at Ray. Bell. Asterius. Confused. Ray. He's a fellow Xeno, he's a Minotaur, he also came out of the hole to help us fight the Loki family, looking at him. Fels. We can only assume that he heard your call and will join us, for now let's follow the plan, seriously. They all nodded and started running again towards Knossos. They had to get there quickly, although Welf and Mikoto would take care of the adventurers, they didn't know if they would make it. But Welf and Mikoto. Mikoto was on a stone roof with her katana drawn attacking 3 adventurers in front of her. She had to stop them and prevent them from informing Finn about the location of Bell and the Xenos. But one of the adventurers was a level 2 and the other level 1, the numbers were in favor of their enemies and they were pushing her back. Mikoto damn, feeling her arms tremble. Mikoto. Everyone looked up and saw a Redeed falling from a building towards them with a large sword. The level 2 adventurer stopped struggling with Mikoto and jumped back, dodging a slash from the Welf's greatsword. Welf. Are you okay? Looking at her. Mikoto. Just a little tired, raising her sword. Welf. Okay, you take care of the 2 level 1s, I'll take care of level 2s, seriously. Both of them launched themselves to attack, each one to his objective, starting another fight, this time evenly. The level 2 adventurer grunted as he clashed swords with the Welf. He tried to push him back, but they were both equal in strength. Adventurer. We will regain our honor. The adventurer began to attack furiously, making Welf retreat. Welf felt a drop of sweat fall from his face. However, he smiled slightly when he saw a small Almridge run across the roofs of the houses towards one of the watchtowers that was being occupied by the Loki family. With Lily. Lily was running across the roofs of the houses transformed into an almirah. He finally stopped a few meters from the tower and looked down, watching a small group of adventurers watch the area. Lily came down from the roof, alarming the adventurers who quickly pointed their spears at her. "He's one of them, kill him." Lily got excited and started running towards one of the alleys being chased by the adventurers. With a little effort he managed to turn a corner and quickly detransformed, falling to the ground and hiding his face with his assistant's cloak. "Hey you. Did you see one of those monsters pass by here?" "Lily. She left over there, tired." Lily pointed ahead of her, and the adventurers went in that direction without saying a word. Lily got up from the ground and saw the watchtower now without guards protecting it. "Lily. I have to make sure that Bell-sama doesn't get into more trouble like this," sighing. Second watchtower. In the watchtower were Raul, Alfie and a few others watching the surroundings from the top of the tower. "Alfie. A group went hunting for an almirah. Should we report it?" Looking at Raul. Raul. No, it's just an almirah, so it's not that important," shaking his head. Alfie nodded and continued to watch with the others until more guides appeared. Raul. Huh. Turning around, "See Captain." Surprised, what are you doing here? Weren't you watching the first tower?" Finn. "Yes, but the Xenos are approaching it from the west side. Call all possible adventurers from the family and direct them towards the first tower. I will go for the executives, seriously." Raul Hi. Raul gathered all his things and ran with his companions to fulfill his captain's orders, but before Raul left he was stopped by Finn. Finn. "And by the way, Raul, do you remember which entrances to Knossos were being monitored?" Glancing at him. "Okay. The 4 gates we discovered to the northwest, northeast, southwest and southeast are all guarded by the 4 groups under Garrus' command," looking at him. Finn. "I see," nodding, "Okay, go immediately to the first tower and wait for further orders," looking at him. Raul. "Understood, Captain." Raul ran off, leaving the place empty except for Finn. Finn. "As easy as fooling a Bell-sama," laughing. The midnight bells ring. Finn glowed for a few seconds before revealing to Lily who had pretended to be him. His magic only allowed him to transform into something of his own height, and fortunately all the Palams had the same height. Lily. "I hear that. Hestia-sama." Taking out a golden stone. Hestia. "I heard it clearly, support, return to Knossos, Bell, and the Xenos should arrive soon." Lily nodded and also left there towards Knossos. With Mikoto and Welf. Things got complicated. Welf and Mikoto were breathing heavily as they watched a large group of adventurers lying on the ground, fainted and defeated. Mikoto. "Where did so many come from?" Breathing heavily. Welf. "No idea, but I think we defeated them all. They won't wake up for a while, let's go back, tired." Mikoto nodded and together with Welf they put on the hood of their cloak and suddenly became invisible. No one saw the trembling adventurer hiding among the defeated bodies of his companions. And they said that being a coward wouldn't help at all. The adventurer got up and quickly ran towards the first tower where the real Finn was. Bell. Bell was in a hidden alley looking at some small Xenos, a war shadow, a bugbear, a firebird among others. He deduced that they were lower level Xenos, level 2 at most. Bell. "You're the group that couldn't make it, huh? Okay, follow us. We'll head toward the entrance of Knossos and take you back to the dungeon." Seriously. Lid. Bellucci, approaching him. Bell. "What's going on?" Looking at him. Bros. "I don't know if you noticed, kid, but the entrance to Knossos is near the Loki family's watchtower," pointing to one of the towers. "How do we get there without being seen?" Bell. "That." Hestia. "Bell-kun. Support-kun has already taken care of the adventurers from the second tower, they have free passage, she will be waiting for them in Knossos to guide them through one of the entrances to the dungeon that the Loki family is not watching." Bell looked at Groz as if he already had his answer and Groz grunted. Groz. "Okay, let's go quickly," flapping his wings. Bell nodded and called the others to go to Knossos. Find them. Finn was in his tower observing the surroundings in silence. Wiene Xenos has already taken a while, thoughtful, and we haven't found any trace of the monsters. It means one of 2 things, 1 they have some magic object that prevents us from seeing them, 2 they know Daedalus better than we do, or both. See Captain. Finn. Raul. Turning around, "What are you doing here?" Frowning. Raul. You said that everyone who was in the area around the second watchtower should come here," pointing at it. Finn. "What?" Perplexed. Hapiton. Finn and Raul turned their gaze to see Aki, a catman with black hair and eyes. She was a level 4 adventurer who was in charge of one of the large guard groups. Aki. "One of our members informed us that bellcranel is with the Xenos in the northeast, at the entrance to the Knossos tunnels, it would be." Finn opened his eyes in shock. Bell was with the Xenos in the northeast. Hadn't that been a distraction? Finn. Damn, clenching his fists, it was a double distraction. They used it to lure some members near the area and get away from them. They made me believe that Bell would just be a distraction, and I sent a small group after him. Well, I sent most of the groups to the southwest, looking at Rawl. They got rid of the surveillance near the second tower in the northeast and the entrance to Knossos, sending the remaining adventurers here, frowning. Finn became frustrated. Rarely had one of his plans failed as miserably as it did now, and that always frustrated him as it made him feel like a fool. And not wanting to feel like a fool, he had made the Hestia Familia's job easier by sending a little more than half of their surveillance groups to the southwest, leaving the northeast area with little protection. They tricked Rawl by sending most of the remaining members here, leaving the southwest area almost completely unprotected. Aiz hadn't come back, so she had probably met someone who was holding her back. Finn. Here. You and Rawl, take half of our groups with you and head to Knossos right away. Seriously. Rawl. What will you do, Captain? Finn. I'll go for Riveria. Gareth is in Knossos, so I trust that the monsters won't be able to get past him and the groups that are in Knossos, seriously. Rawl and Aki nodded and left immediately, leaving Finn there, who took his spear and looked in the direction where the entrance to Knossos was. Finn. It took you a long time, inconveniences. Aiz was a few meters behind him, slightly bruised and with some scratches on her clothes, but apparently fine. Aiz. Someone challenged me to a duel. He was strong, looking at him. Finn nodded and turned to look at her. Finn, come with me, we'll go to the entrance of Knossos, seriously. Aiz tilted her head in confusion at Finn's order, who explained to her. Finn. Bellcranel and the Xenos are heading towards Knossos to try to escape, we must prevent that, seriously. Aiz. But Gareth was in Knossos, wouldn't it be better to ambush them there? Confused. Finn. No, we must regain our prestige, people must see how we defeat those monsters and kill them, seriously, if possible it is best to do it on the surface, so let's go quickly, first we will go look for Riveria too, serious. Aiz nodded and ran with Finn to look for Riveria. Riveria. Speaking of the High Elf. Freeze it all, permafrost. Riveria, who was walking through the streets of Daedalus with her squad, opened her eyes in shock and shook her head, observing a large ice storm heading towards her. Several meters behind the storm he saw Redid using a giant almost white sword, a magic sword. Riveria. I won't be able to use the third level of my protection magic, alarmed. Riveria turned her gaze back, seeing the group under her command. Her group was mainly made up of magic. Among those magicians was a certain elf with golden blonde hair who looked tremblingly at the great icy storm that was approaching them. They all saw the storm approaching in slow motion towards them, but they couldn't react, their bodies were in shock and motionless, none of them had a short-chant protection magic that they could activate fast enough. And there were hundreds of buildings around with no alleys, a dead end so to speak. Riveria clicked her tongue and quickly raised her staff, watching as the storm grew closer and closer. She had a protection magic that could protect them all, and it was a very short chant, but there was a problem, and that is that she could only use the magic in two ways. If she used it on herself, the effect would be at its maximum, and she would be covered in a layer of green all over her body that would protect her against magical and physical attacks, and would even heal her if she had injuries, but if she did that she couldn't use it on anyone else. Meaning the members behind her would be completely frozen, and they were level 3 or below, they wouldn't withstand that ice attack. And if she used her magic on all of them, the magic would weaken depending on how many people she used it on, plus she wouldn't be able to use the magic on herself. Riveria narrowed her eyes, at least she could take the attack head on and survive. But the decision already made, Riveria extended her staff back pointing at all the members of her squad and began to recite her chant. Riveria. Gather around, breath of the earth, my name is Alf. Veil breath. Immediately a huge green magic circle appeared on the ground, the circle reached all the members behind Riveria and a strange greenish layer covered them all. Lefiya reached out her hand to her teacher in shock, watching as her body began to freeze. Lefiya. Riveria Sam. Cough. Lefiya closed her eyes and took a few steps back, feeling a large current of cold air push her back. He felt his body cool down greatly, his body temperature dropped drastically, and he saw a bit of frost forming on his body. The ice storm stopped and Lefiya fell to her knees, breathing heavily as she shivered from the cold. Several other members also fell to their knees while coughing heavily or clutching their chests in pain. Lefiya slowly looked up with difficulty, her clothes were made of a special material, so it could be said that she didn't feel as cold as the others around her, she was better off than the others, and slowly got up from the ground, watching the green magic circle fade away. And there he saw her. Riveria stood there with a serene look and her bacillus extended towards them, her figure was visible but slightly blurred, the reason. The large amount of ice that covered her from head to toe like a pillar, preventing any slightest movement of the high elf. Lefiya. Teacher. Exalted. Lefiya ran towards the frozen Riveria and put her hands on the ice in shock, not knowing what to do. The first thing she thought about was using magic, but she couldn't do that. One wrong move and she would seriously damage Riveria. Lefiya gripped her magic staff tightly and raised it above her head to strike the ice. She knew she wasn't the strongest physically, in fact, in a one-on-one, she could barely kill a minotaur if she didn't have the help of someone covering her, but she was level 3, so her blows must have done something. Lefiya slammed her staff against the ice with all the force she could, she looked up hopefully, but her hopes quickly died when she saw the ice completely untouched. Lefiya kept trying harder until she saw some small, almost tiny cracks starting to appear, but something was something. He thought she had done it, but he quickly noticed that Riveria seemed to be tensing the muscles of her face inside the ice and in general of her whole body. That's when he understood. He was trying to break free, tensing his muscles to put pressure on the ice and break it. Lefiya began to hit faster, along with several other members who wanted to help their vice captain. Crash. Nobody paid attention to that noise, they were more focused on helping Riveria. And Welf was grateful for that, watching a magic sword in his hand shatter into pieces. Welf couldn't help but feel sweat running down his face, he had used his most powerful magic sword, in fact it only had one shot, and that's why it broke. He wasn't sure about this plan, but Lily had told him that it would be fine. It was almost certain that Riveria would protect the other members of her family, she had thoroughly investigated Riveria and knew of her rapid enchantment protection magic that could protect all of them. Welf also worried about Riveria, not wanting to harm her or worse, kill her with his sword, but Lily told him that she was the best mage in Arario and who had the best magical protection, so that attack wouldn't kill her, but it would leave her locked up there for a long time, at least long enough. Welf still wasn't very sure, but he saw everyone's determination, even Bell had been very serious and had helped Lily make a plan. He gave her the idea of being a double decoy for the adventurers and for Finn, and from what he saw, the plan went much better than they expected. If everyone was so determined he would have to do it too, right? And so he did. Welf activated his invisibility cloak and left the place silently, he still had things to do. Knossos. Finally everyone arrived at the entrance of Knossos. One by one the monsters went down along with Lily and Bell, who had in his hand a strange sphere with an eye on it. It was the amulet that Ryu had given him on the 18th floor. When the Xenos attacked, they discovered that the item was like a key to open the doors of Knossos, so they had to use it. Well, it seems they are here. El Hermes-sama. Bell watched the god Hermes leaning against the wall along with Asfi, who watched them in silence. Hermes. Hello Bell-kun, how have you been? Smiling. Bell. I'll be fine when this is all over. Do you have the map? Hermes. Here it is, taking out a notebook. Hestia has a copy of the map of Knossos too, she will guide us, but just in case it is better to have this, smiling. Bell nodded and looked at everyone. Bell. Okay, it's time to go. Hestia. Bell. Bell. What's wrong, Kami-sama? Looking at his forearm. Hestia. It's Mikoto. She's a few blocks away from you, she's fighting against many adventurers, and more keep appearing. Welf went to help her, but they're overwhelmed. Haraham is going as support, but we need more help. Bell. What? Why didn't you warn me? Hestia. They broke the communication stone that was intertwined with yours. Hurry, according to the special Fels map, the large feathers are the strongest enemies, and at this moment several are approaching your location. Fels. We must go help them, seriously. Bell. No, turning around, I'll go, you have to escape, serious. Lily P. But, Bell-sama. Hermes. Your captain made a small decision, Palom, smiling. Lily frowned and kicked Hermes in the shin, who yelled in pain. Asfi seemed to look at this with a small smile. Bell. I need you to take the Xenos to the dungeon. I know they will be fine with Hermes-sama and Asfi-san, but I need someone I trust a lot to be there too, take it. Bell handed the key to Knossos to Lily, who continued to look at him indecisively. Bell. Can you? Smiling slightly. Lily. Ugh, I better reward Lily for this. Taking the key. Lily turned to look at the Xenos and raised the key. Lily. Good. Follow me, for no reason separate or move away from each other, be careful not to touch anything and be quiet. I'm sure the captain of the Loki family put guards to watch over Knossos, it would be. Everyone nodded and began to follow Lily through the large hole, leaving Bell behind. Lily was at the front commanding the Xenos, while Asfi and Hermes were at the back. Hermes gave Bell one last look, watching him quickly leave the hole. Hermes. His determination has grown, but so has his fear. Maybe he needs a little push now that he's a little better, turning around. Bell. Bell was running through the streets of Daedalus at high speed, following the guidance of Hestia, who was telling him where to go. Finally Bell climbed onto the roof of a house and looked at the other side, watching Welf and Mikoto fight against a large group of adventurers that seemed to increase little by little. More arrived than those Mikoto and Welf defeated. Bell raised his head hearing a voice near him, a voice he recognized. On the hammer and on the ground, may good fortune grant you. Bell Haraham. Prisuchide no Kazuchi. Suddenly Makoto was enveloped in a bright aura and with a single attack, she knocked out 5 adventurers. Makoto. Thank you Haraham Dono. Welf quick, use your gravity magic. Makoto. Immediately. Bell approached the edge of the house and watched Haraham hiding in an alley watching Makoto and Welf. Haraham. Take care please Welf-sama Makoto-san, distressed. Bell was about to talk to Haraham until he felt a huge blizzard push him and force him to step back a little. Bell. What is this? It looks like. Ah. Welf Dono. Bell opened his eyes and watched a fight, seeing how a blonde-haired Palom and a certain golden-haired swordswoman appeared, wrapped in a protective winged cape that seemed to slowly sway her hair. Bell looked at Welf and was excited to see him embedded in the wall of a building with his greatsword broken. Welf spat out a little blood and fell to the ground unable to move, he felt great pain throughout his body and could barely feel his limbs. Finn. Well maybe I exaggerated a little, twisting his spear, but that doesn't matter does it? Pointing his spear at him, feeling a tap on his shoulder. Aiz Finn, touching his shoulder, there. Aiz pointed in the direction where Bell was and Finn looked at him out of the corner of his eye. Finn. Oh well, looks like things are going to be fun here. Behind Finn appeared more adventurers who alarmed Bell. Fiona. Hi. Smiling. Bet. The strong ones have arrived, you pile of trash, growling. Tyan. I didn't find any trace of the Black Minotaur, sighing. Finn. Did you escape from Riveria? Oh well, I guess I can punish you later, sighing. Tyan. Anytime, Captain. Smiling. Fintiona, bet, go to the entrance of Knossos and look for the monsters, it's impossible for people to see us kill them, but we'll make sure to do it anyway, seriously. Fiona and Bet nodded and ran towards the place. Bell couldn't even say anything when suddenly his instincts became alarmed and he had to lower his head dodging a slash from a sword. Bell moved away a little from his attacker and looked at him, opening his eyes in surprise when he saw Aiz. Bell. Aiz-san. Aiz Bell. And. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching, if you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day bye.